You look lonely. I can fix that.
Loneliness is one of the most hollow feelings you can have. It gnaws away at your soul, and compared to other negative emotions, loneliness often feels worse because it can appear out of nowhere and for no obvious reason. It could be said that there sort of is a paradox in loneliness, where it is a fleeting feeling that lingers with you. It's a feeling you get when driving home after a party ends, or walking alone through the streets during a rainy night. Sometimes, you don't even have to be alone to feel lonely. You could be surrounded by your friends at a bar, but yet there's a certain melancholy that you can't seem to pinpoint the source of. I would say that nostalgia and sadness are the parents of loneliness, while its evil sister is the feeling of ecstasy. That would explain why we feel so unstoppable when drunk or high, and then empty and depressed the next day when the effect wears off and we are sober again. I feel like this feeling of loneliness has hit an all-time high these past few years. Maybe it's just the YouTube and Instagram algorithm catering to my subconscious, and everyone else around me is doing just fine, but there's a ton of studies and other videos talking about this phenomenon to back me up. If it wasn't true, then there wouldn't be so many people liking these type of posts. At the very least, the number of lonely souls in the world was always this much, just that we can see it on full display through the internet now. From looking at all the posts, two very prominent music genres that masterfully explore loneliness in modern society are Synthwave and Phonk. These two genres each take a very different approach, and I wanted to use this video as an opportunity to link these two worlds together. Synthwave is a genre that has recently exploded in popularity this past decade. On Spotify, the Retrowave and Vaporwave playlists have a combined total of over 1 million likes, which is very surprising for a genre that lacks any vocals at all. This past year, one particular Synthwave song keeps popping up over and over again on social media edits. The song that I'm referring to is, of course, Resonance. I was first introduced to this song during the beginning of 2020, when everything shut down and everyone was in quarantine. It was a time of great uncertainty and solitude, and I, like many people, gravitated towards the internet as a form of comfort. Naturally, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what makes Resonance so relatable? Well, from looking at all the Instagram reels and TikTok, we can clearly see that all these edits use Resonance to elicit a form of nostalgic loneliness. Resonance struck a chord within me, and I felt like it did for many others as well. And I think that is an important clue for the recent rise of the synthwave genre and its evolution. Anytime I listen to a synthwave piece these days, the beat is slow, calm, and quiet, with a tinge of sadness hidden within. Over the past few years, the focus of synthwave in pop culture has been shifting away from its nostalgic upbeat origins towards a more depressing, lonely feel. But to understand how this shift occurred, I need to spend some time talking about the history of synthwave in order for you to see how it became such an important genre for exploring loneliness. If you didn't know already, the musical genre of synthwave gets its name from the synthesizer, an electronic musical instrument that can produce sounds that no normal instrument could do. Of course, as with all technology, the first synthesizers such as the RCA Mark II and Moog synthesizer were huge bulky machines that used vacuum tubes. They were difficult to use and move and thus were not sold commercially. There needed to be a smaller portable synthesizer for the masses, and the first that would achieve this goal would be the Mini Moog. If you ever heard of the Minecraft song Moog City and wondered what it meant, now you know. When the Mini Moog came out in 1970, it was during a turbulent time of technological and cultural progress unlike any other. Mankind had just set foot on the moon a year ago. There were all types of social movements happening around this time, such as anti-war protests, gay rights, women's rights, and civil rights. It was the decade of individual identity, where everyone wanted their voices heard. And what musical genre would better fit this than the rise of disco, where you could party all night and express yourself through dancing? One important artist during this time was Giorgio Moroder, who is now considered the godfather of synthwave. He was influential in some of the biggest hits during this time, releasing songs such as Chase and Take My Breath Away. but you can clearly tell the synth was used to set a playful background environment, perfect for everyone at the club to groove to. For the synth to adapt a more gloomy and ominous tone, it would take some major breakthroughs in science in the upcoming decades. As the world entered the 1980s, the next 2 decades would see a huge growth in computer technology. Personal computers became more sophisticated and accessible to the general public. Tech companies such as Apple and Microsoft would clash in huge battles over market share, each of them trying to one-up the other. The Sony Walkman was refined into the first portable music player, allowing you to play any song you wanted, anywhere you wanted. Video game consoles were slowly becoming popular. And with the rise of tech came a rise of interest in a genre that would often rely on the synthesizer for its futuristic sounds. This was Synthwave 1, the rise of sci-fi. 2 well-known artists during this time were Jean-Michel Jarre and Vangelis. Jean-Michel Jarre invented impressive light shows that remind me of cyber cities, as if there was a huge never-ending party in the center of dystopia. On the other hand, Vangelis would help create the score for the original Blade Runner. Although science fiction wasn't new, there was a new growing perspective, manifesting in the form of the cyberpunk genre. The rise of technology had caused a small group of cynics to become wary of the new tech megacorporations and the government. We can see this in the films during this time, with sentient machines or massive corporations juxtaposed against the poor and huddled masses. Synthwave fit the cyberpunk genre perfectly, with its long empty chords and no vocals. As we entered the 1990s, something known as the World Wide Web began to pique the interest of the general public. It would not only allow you to communicate with anyone else in the world, but also share your thoughts or sell a product. Many companies would quickly ride this hype, leading investors to place large sums of their savings into any startup that had a .com suffix in their name. Ultimately, it would be too much and the stock market would implode in 2001. The .com bubble crash would spell the end of a tech-driven decade and the beginning of a new millennium. The 2000s were a dull time for synthwave, to be honest. The past 2 waves already explored much of the potential of synthwave, so the only thing left to do was to reminisce on the good old days. Many games and music became centered around the nostalgia of the 1980s aesthetic. Daft Punk would heavily influence the culture at this time, with tracks such as Around the World and Stronger, Better, Faster. Their helmets made them fit the aesthetic of futuristic astronauts and of the cyberpunk motorcycle rebels. If I asked you to imagine a wallpaper that symbolized the synthwave genre, you'd probably come up with something like this. Many pieces of media had to come together to form this image for synthwave. The Tron movie would be the source of inspiration for the grid lines, representing a futuristic digital world. If there are cities or neon colors in the picture, then it was probably inspired by the dystopia of megacities in cyberpunk films or even in real life. If there are palm trees or cars, then you can thank Outrun or GTA Vice City, car-centric games who both use synthesizers in their soundtracks. Of course, we can't forget the sunset, which was inspired by vintage beach t-shirts. The synthwave nostalgia would last late into the 2000s before EDM took over. EDM was like the new wave of disco, with loud bass drops and even funkier grooves, musical traits that made it a popular choice for parties at the time. The tech revolution also continued full steam with the release of the first iPhone, along with the rise of social media apps such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. The world would become ever closer and society would feel so interconnected, everyone thought. – 2022. This past year was when the pandemic was finally far enough away for the world to process what happened. But the world is no longer the same as it was 3 years ago. Life will never return to what it was like before. Quarantine showed us a possible future where everything could be done from the comfort of your home. You could work from home, stream the new series named How to Get a College Degree through the Zoom app, and even connect to your family and friends through the power of social media. Yet, something feels off. Last summer, I graduated from college, got a job, and finally moved out to an apartment in a new city far away from my hometown. It was the first time that I ever was truly on my own. It is a great step for independence and maturing, but also the first time I felt truly lonely. No longer would I be eating dinner every night with my family, or hanging out every week with my lifelong friends. Calling friends and family helped a little, but it's not quite the same. And just like during the pandemic, I've tried to get rid of the aura of uncomfortable solitude by watching streamers or YouTube videos to keep the intrusive thoughts at bay, but it always seemed to make the issue worse. I think people began to realize how lonely they truly were and how dystopian the world felt. Virtual reality, artificial intelligence, online dating, social media, these are just some of the many things that promise to solve the world's problems and bring us all closer together, but has instead alienated us all. Yet again, we are trying to find ourselves in the chaos. Around the same time, a new genre of music began to gain traction, one that takes the same concept of loneliness and tries to spin it another way. A call to action to rise against the norms of modern society. A genre that also involved cars. Its high-pitched cowbells and distorted vocals match so well with this new rebel movement. We want to be known as unique and out of the ordinary. When I first heard drift funk, it was from the Megamind memes. It was a funny little edit, and I don't think any of us knew how it would go on to define 2022 and become the face of a new trend now known as the Sigma male movement. Memes and theories on masculinity were always prominent, with terms such as alpha male or giga chad, but this new trend feels like a response to the changing times. Sigma males were what the ideology of masculinity was, but now more lonely and with a vehement attitude towards society. A collective group of people focused on working on themselves and rejecting everything and everyone else, for in their mind there was nothing left besides themselves. The movement also had good intentions of motivating men to improve themselves mentally and physically. However, no matter how many memes or posts praise the idea of self-dependence and being a strong, independent male, there are always cracks of insecurity that would peek through, whether intentional or not. The lone wolf had become the lonely wolf. Loneliness has become more and more prominent in today's society, and the reason why we feel more lonely than ever is because our spheres of influence have increased. You can contact anyone else in the world, see anyone and anything all from the comfort of your seat. The idea of a small, close-knit community has been fractured, now replaced by one big digital society. The internet is like a never-ending party filled with an endless supply of drugs to keep you entertained and preoccupied. And once you log off and are all alone again, it is the same feeling walking back home alone and sober. Synthwave and Phonk perfectly embody loneliness in dystopia. In both Synthwave and Phonk, the aesthetic of cars drifting away into the sunset represents the idea of an escape for society and all its problems. But this is a dangerous illusion and an unachievable fantasy. Society cannot properly function without the help of its members. Instead of turning away, we need to bravely face society and overcome the challenges it poses. From one lonely soul to another on the internet, just know that you're not alone in being lonely. Hopefully talking about it is a good first step towards solving this issue. Above all else, remember to treasure yourself and those around you, and remember to have some time for those around you who really matter.